Hi, and welcome to this next webinar in Project Team. This one's going to be all about one of my favorite topics in the system, which is going to be reports. This is going to be kind of a two-part webinar. So this is the first part of reporting. I want to cover a lot of the basics, how to navigate to the reporting area, how to set up and plan for a report, and then go over all the different things that you can do with a report, group and filter, add styles, add logos, export that to PDF or Excel, maybe schedule a report, all of those great things that you can do within the system. And then my part two of the webinar series is going to be a little bit later, probably about a month from now, and that's going to go a little bit deeper, how to set up charts and visualizations, working with dashboards and all the great things that you can do there from a drill down capability standpoint. So before I get started, kind of overview, what can you do in projectteam.com right now? So Project Team has really great reporting tools, very powerful reports where you can pull any of the data in your projects or even cross projects. So if you want to run a report across some program or some subset of projects within your whole organization, you can certainly do that. And the best part is that we typically say no PhD required. A lot of us at Project Team have a background in working with different project management applications. In the past, there have been frustrations from internal consultants or users that we had worked with other systems in holy crap, reports are just way too hard. They're so scary in different ways, or I need a PhD to be able to do anything significant. In Project Team, we've worked very hard to make sure that reports are not complicated. You can go in there and create really robust reports just within a few clicks. And once you get good at it, I guarantee you can make reports within 5 minutes. And the report that we'll show today, if we were working really quickly, we could probably make that in 5-10 minutes here. But we will spend probably around 40 minutes to go through each step and help you guys out. Beyond that, the point of your reports is to provide real-time visibility into the health of your project. So anything that you do in your projects, including any customizations that you make, and we've spent time in earlier webinars talking about how to add customizations to your projects, whether that's on your contracts or your change orders or your budget side, or you're just adding custom fields, whatever it might be. You can roll all of those things into these robust reports and dashboards that you're working with. And the point of your reports is really to draw attention to potential issues or solve things on your projects before they happen. And then finally, with any great reporting tool, you need to be able to get the data out of the system. Typically what we say is any decent system is going to, Excel, etc., lets you type information into a system, but it's the information that you can get out in a meaningful way that really provides the most value. So in Project Team, we allow you to export to things like Excel, PDF, rich text, which in many ways is like Word, CSV, HTML. Even when you get those things out into those different formats, it's going to respect all of that styling that you put into your report. So it'll look great no matter what format you have it in. And then finally, and I might have touched on this in previous webinars, you can do something called scheduling your report. So scheduling would be automatically delivering that report at a day and time of your choosing on whatever recurring basis that you set up. My next slide here, just what are reporting rules in Project Team? The things to keep in mind if I'm getting ready to start in reporting, or maybe I've done reports a few times, this is what I would recommend going forward. The first step is don't be intimidated by reports. I think a lot of people, especially when we talk to people, reporting has this thing about it that seems scary because it's a lot of data, and reports can look really fancy. Holy crap, how did somebody make that? Reports don't have to be crazy. You can make a lot of reports with a lot of data, and it's just a few clicks, and it's the repeating of the data that takes up all the space on the pages. So don't be intimidated by the reports, and I think you'll be all right. Next, the basics of reporting. So what I'm going to show in this webinar is probably 95% of what you would ever need in reports. There are lots of ways to build very complex reports or robust reports, and pulling in things called categories and multiple categories through joins, grouping that data 100 different times and getting your output there. But that's probably the lesser case. I'd say 95% of the reports that most people make are going to be based on 1 or 2 categories, and it's repeating on data that you guys have, and you just already, you can just filter and sort the look and feel of that thing, and then just add, your branding to that. And then finally, the number one thing I'd say is, what's the point of a report or your report? Before you create a report, there needs to be some point. Am I looking for overdue information, or if I'm calling out responsible contractors in my reports? That should be the main focus of that report. So don't let that information get buried in all the other things that you can do in your report. So I'd say number 3 there, really understand your goal and then make a plan around how you want your report to look. So what does planning look like? Planning can be as easy as writing that down on a piece of paper. Okay, so right before this webinar, I made a plan to create, this RFI looking report. Before I got into the system, I got out my notepad and just wrote some things down here. So you can see I've got logos, I've got maybe a title in that upper right. I've got some kind of grouping there by something called a category. That's just some field within my database. I do want to have some kind of summation, etc. What we're going to do today is we're going to turn this idea or this plan into something that looks like this. Okay, so this is a more developed report. This is nice, it's clean, it's giving me the data that I want to see in the format that I want to see it. So throughout this presentation, we're going to go ahead and build something like this from scratch. I would consider this a pretty basic report, but it's going to get you a really, really far way in building pretty much whatever report that you need. So what we'll do today is we'll build a brand new custom report from scratch. We're going to add things like our logos to the reports. There's a couple different types of logos that you can include. You all have your own company or organization logo. You also have your project logos within your different projects, and that can be based on joint ventures that you're doing or some collaboration that you have. And you can include those in your reports as well, or you can include both of those. It doesn't really matter. We'll sort and group our data. Those things are going to be pretty closely tied, and I'll talk about that. But in this case, I'm looking at like the category, like I said on that drawing, the illustration that I made. I've got drawing issues, general inquiries, structural questions. Those are things like my categories on my RFIs. You can have whatever categories you want. That's just an example. We want to highlight issues. So the point of this report to me right now is based on my category, which things are overdue. And so you can see in here, I've got these red dots on the left-hand side. Those correspond to the due date on the right-hand side, showing me everything that is was due at a time that's before today's date, which would be, in my mind, called overdue. We're going to summarize our data. So at the bottom of each one of these groups, you can see the total or the subtotal of each of those data points. Also, at the top of the screen, you can see another summary that's telling me within my drawing issues, let's say, I have 2 overdue RFIs. Within the last category, the structural questions, I've got 5 overdue RFIs. We'll talk about how to do that. And then finally, we're going to print or schedule a report. Now that we've built that report, we can get out of the system. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the demo here. So in previous webinars, I've logged in. We can skip general navigation for now. I'm going to go into this projects dropdown, click into my webinar project number 2, something that I've used in the past, and go into the reporting area. I could go into the company area to do my reporting, but for now, I'm going to kind of stick to this reporting side. Right. So this is, let's say, the first time that we're looking inside the reporting tool of Project Team. What are the things that I see? On the left-hand side, we have these 3 default folders: My Access, My Company Access, and All User Access. These 3 things are just kind of a security blanket of reports, and you can build reports and put them in each one of these buckets or these folders here. My Access means that only my user, so any report that I create and put into the My Access area, only Josh would be able to see. The My Company Access is going to have a couple subfolders in it. Standard reports are reports that your organization creates and are your company standards and only can be edited by your company admins. Those things would be created at the company level. You can't really touch what's in there. You see that little lock. Custom reports, if I open that up, I see any reports that I have that I've created that I want the rest of my company team to be able to view and run, but they're not a company standard. Maybe it's just something I created ad hoc for this project or for whatever reason. Below that, you have all user access. These are any user on your project, whether that's internal or external. The other piece of that is that has access to the categories, and we'll talk about categories, can see these reports. So system reports or custom reports that you might be running that you want your contractors or clients or whoever it might be to also be able to run. To create a brand new report, I'm going to click the plus button at the top left. When I do, I see a few different options here, and I can actually expand this to see a few other options, and we're going to talk about each one of these. The most of my time is going to be spent either on the Express report or the Advanced reports, and we'll talk about why and the other things that you can do. The Advanced report is the full capability of the reporting tool within Project Team. What we typically say is don't let the word advanced scare you. It's not crazy hard or anything. It's just advanced capabilities where you can go in here and do anything that you want with your data in this reporting side. That is where I'm going to spend probably 99% of my time within this presentation. Underneath of that, you have dashboards. Dashboards are like visualizations that you can add that have tiles and call out data in certain ways, and I can show some examples of that in a second. You can also pull any reports that you've created into your dashboard. So let's say that there's some kind of really nice tabular report you have on one side of your dashboard, you want to show that. On the other side of your dashboard, you want big numbers or KPI type of data that you want to pull out, you can do that. Express reports are like advanced reports, little brother, I'd say, where you can start with an Express report, put in your data there. It works and gets you, 80% of the way. But the last mile of that, if you want to go a little bit further, you can actually migrate an Express report to an Advanced report, and that decision is final. Again, you can do whatever you want in the Advanced reporting tool, and I'll show that. Crosstab is going to be a little bit more advanced, and I can talk about that a little bit later. And then the chain report. If there are 4 or 5 reports that you eventually build, and they all might not be related, but they're all in the same project and they make sense for your weekly reviews or something, you can chain reports together so that when you run a chain report, all of those 4 or 5 reports that you're running get printed at the same exact time. That also includes if you're creating a schedule for reports and you schedule a chain report, those 4 or 5 reports that you've chained together are going to get into one file, so let's say one PDF, and deliver to your email box every Monday at 7 a.m. So it makes it a really good way to kind of aggregate a lot of data. Like I mentioned, I'm going to skip some of these other ones for now, and I'm going to go ahead and create an advanced report. I'm going to click on Advanced Report. So I'll go ahead and close this sidebar here because I'm not going to need that for now. So I'll go ahead and close it. This first page that I see is the kind of a nice little 5-step wizard, which is going to walk me through the setup of my report. The first area is going to ask me for a name. Let's say that I'm going to say this is my webinar RFI report. Okay. Next, it's going to ask me which folder that I want to put it into. I'm just going to say the My Access folder for now. This is a really great place to start as you're kind of getting started with reports, because you can do this. Nobody else can see it. You can make sure it all runs well and works and all that. And then eventually you can drag and drop your report into any of the other buckets that you want. So it's almost like unpublished versus publishing your report in that way. So that's what I'll do for right now. I'm just gonna say my access. I can also put a description. I'm just gonna say created by Josh on 8/26/2021. Okay, just something that'll help you identify what this report is all about. That doesn't necessarily show up in the name, but when you're searching for reports, you can find that. The second tab here is called categories. I can get there by clicking categories or by clicking next on this bottom right. I like to just use these at the top, so I'm just going to click on categories. Categories are all the different form types or collections or general, I'm going to say categories, throughout your different projects. So I have requests for information and submittals and field reports and contracts and budgets. All of those are forms. You can see that through here. Those are forms. Okay, each one of these is its own category. So if I see budget amendments, if I close this and I look for budget amendments, I see that thing as a category. Every form is a category. Also, any collection, so any table that's on a form. So like a contract has a schedule of values, right? So schedule of values is a category within here. So it's going to be the form type dash the collection. So contract schedule values. In that way, I can build reports that just show top level contract data, or I can build reports that show top level data and data within each one of those collections, which is the schedule values. So I can talk more about that maybe on my next webinar. Okay. For now, I'm going to just look for RFIs because that's the sample that we asked about. So I'm going to say RFIs. I could drag and drop that around or just click the little arrow to put it in this right side screen. The other thing that I want to do, when I added RFIs in here, you immediately find that a lot of these other things got kind of grayed out. That's because by default, let's say RFIs has nothing to do from a data standpoint with budget amendments. Okay, so it's not gonna, those things aren't related. You can't put those things together on your report. However, you can, because project team is so configurable, you might actually have data within those two categories that you do want to tie together. So to tie those things together, we need something that's going to be common between those two form types, and that's going to be the project category. So if I have RFIs and I also include the projects category, you'll notice all these other categories are going to open up again for me. Okay, so if I go back and X this out, you'll see budget amendments is there. Again, if I try to put budget amendments in here at this point, it's probably going to give me some messy data because I'm not really joining any fields within those two categories. But if we had a case, and I will have a case next month on that, we can join based on fields of those two categories. Okay, so if you're adding something in here, let's say RFIs, and you're wondering why the other ones turn off, it's because of those unrelated categories. If you want to turn them back on, you got to include the project side or category. The last category that I want to include is my project logo category. So in this case, I'm just going to drag that right in there. I have those three categories now showing up on the right-hand side. Next, we'll go to sorts. Sorts are like how you want your data to look when you print that report or you run that report. For example, I'm using RFIs. Maybe my RFIs, and they do actually have RFI numbers. So I want it to show, 1 through 25 or number 25 down to 1. So that would be ascending or descending. I'm going to say descending here. I want the latest RFI, in my case, I think number 23, to be at the top. The first RFI number 1 to be at the bottom. In the sort side, you also need to be able to, anything that you want to group by, you also need to put in as a sort. Okay, so if you remember from my PowerPoint, and I'll jump back over there, I was grouping by this category field, okay? So I do need to include a category in my sort. I'm going to skip that for now because I want to show you how to add that at a later point. But just know I do need, if I want to group by something, I need to include that as a sort. Filters, I'm going to skip for my example, but let's say I want to filter out some data. Let's say in my report, I don't want to show RFIs that are already closed. I can filter out closed. Okay, so that's an example there. And then my layout. If I wanted to, I could completely skip this step, okay? For now, maybe I'll show you how to do this, but I typically like to skip the step. It does have some benefit, like I could say RFI number here, and that's going to start to build my little sample report at the bottom. I could say that I also want to show the subject field, okay, and that's going to show second. Okay, so I can add all of these different columns that I want in my report over to the right-hand side, and that's going to build that thing. So if I continue here, and I'm probably going to get rid of most of these, but I can go ahead and do that. If I say finish, this is what my report's going to look like, and now I can style more from there. Okay? But for now, I'm going to go ahead and X these things out because I just want to show that you don't need to use this tab all the time. So I'm just going to say finish here. So what's been created so far is now a new report for me with these basic 5 columns, and that's always going to be the default unless you include columns in that last step that I just deleted from. And it gives you kind of what you titled this RFI or this report. This is, in this case, and I can kind of grow this up one side there. This has a cell, and this is kind of looking like Excel at this point. So this is a cell that has been merged together. I'm going to unmerge those things and now delete that data. And now I have a really blank looking grid here, which is similar to Excel. Okay. If I look in the gear icon, I see a lot of those same tabs that we looked at before now showing up. If I wanted to rename it, add a description, add categories. If you remember, we put RFI projects and project logo in there. Sorts, which I'm going to have to get back into in a second. But if you remember, if I click on that, I added RFI number to my sort. Filters, and then you have different options that you want, and I'll go into that in a second. All right. So in this report right now, I'm going to open up this little database icon and open up, here's all these different categories that I have access to. I'm going to open up the RFIs category. In my document, I'm going to go ahead in this detail area. Okay, this is going to be your repeating data. Start to add my different columns. So I'm going to say RFI number. I'm just going to drag that to column A here. Okay. At this point, I technically have a runnable report. I could run this thing, and this is going to give me all of my RFIs in the descending order that I had. It's only showing me RFI number because that's the only field that I added. But it is a workable, I can run that report. You know, it doesn't make much sense, but I have a report at this point. Next, I can add something like my subject, as I mentioned. So I'm just going to drag subject in here. Next, I can say requested by, and that's somebody's name, let's say. Date requested, due date or date due. Okay, all of these fields are just things that show up on my RFI document. You might have different fields based on what has been set up, and those can be done through configurations or if you're your admin or whatever. But I have these 5 in here, or 5 in there. I also want a couple of extras. I want a cost impact and a schedule impact. So all I need to do is add a couple columns. I'll just click on the last column and say after. Okay, it's going to add 1 after. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and delete that for a second. The other thing that you can do, I actually need to add 2 columns after E. I can click on E, hold the shift key and click on D, and then say insert after, and it's going to give me 2 columns. So if I had a really large report and I actually needed to add an additional 5 columns to the right, instead of adding them one by one, I could have just highlighted the 5 columns at the top, said insert after, and then boom, 5 columns would be added to the end there. Okay, so in here, I'm also going to say cost impact and schedule impact. Okay. At this point, if I run it, it's going to give me a lot of data. I don't have any headers. One of the nice things that I skipped in that wizard flow, that last step of the wizard, since I took away all those columns, it would have default given me headers, but I just like to write these in there just in case they're different. And you can always edit them, but I'm just going to go say requested by, date requested, date due, cost impact, and schedule impact. Okay, and let's just say days because that's what it says in there. Okay, so now I have this nice report. The last column that I want to add is going to be my category. Okay? And for now, I'm going to add this just so we can see it, but I'm actually going to do something different with it. In here now, I have the basics of my report. I even have this nice header. It's kind of hard when I run this report. It's going to be kind of hard, maybe not, to see the header because it's the same look and feel as the rest of my data. So you can start to do some formatting in there to call that out in a different way. So I'm actually going to click on H3, hold my Shift key, and click all the way back here. So it's going to highlight that in that light blue and make it bold. Okay. Cool. So now when I run this thing, and I'm going to continue to run this over and over again, that's what I typically do. I think that's a good rule of thumb. As we're making a change, go ahead and run it. Make a change, go ahead and run it, see what happens. But that's looking in this way. The thing that I see at this point is the data is looking a little bit cramped. I'd actually like this thing to, my page looks whatever portrait right now. I want to actually make it landscape side so the text has a little bit more room to breathe. I can go back into my edit side, go to the gear icon, options, general. Down at the bottom, I can say I want it to fit the page of my, or the width of my page. And I can also change it to landscape mode and say, okay. It won't look much different in this editor view, but when I run it this time, okay, it's going to be a little bit wider. Okay, so it's going to be that landscape view. So you can see here now things are starting to stretch out. If I look at this one versus this one, my text has a little bit more room to breathe, and I can even expand this within the editor tool to show a little bit more. Okay, I'm starting to add a lot of runs of my report here, and any of these little, triangles or the play icon are the runs of my report. If I want to take all those away, and I'm really just interested in this edit side, I can right click here and close all other tabs. Okay, so now you can see I just have that tab ready to work on. Every time I run, it's going to make a new tab. I can X those out whenever I need. Okay. The next thing that I want to do is add maybe a header to my report. So I'm going to go up here and I'm just going to type in here, this is my RFI report. That's up there. The thing that I haven't touched on too much is these different sections on the left-hand side. So if I click on any of these sections, I get this add section option, and you can see there's a lot of different sections that I can add. The page header has already been added, and the detail section has already been added. The page header is going to be something that shows up on top of every page when you print your report. Okay, so this is a good thing to say. This is the date of the report, or maybe this is my company name, whatever it might be. The report header, a lot of times, is the place where you might put the name of your report, or the columns of your report, the column headers, something that I only want to show at the top of the overall report, but I don't need those things repeated on each page. The detail is all the data that's going to be repeated based on the data from your system. That's why I have all these fields in here in this details area. Okay, all my field data is in the details, and if I run it, you'll notice that the header information is only shown once. The detail information, even though I just dragged one field over there for RFI number, is getting repeated as many times as I have data for. Okay, so that's the benefit of the data side. Report footer and page footer, same thing, but opposite of what I said from the header side. And then you have these groups. And the groups is actually what I want to create in a second. So if I say I want to add a group header, it's going to ask me, okay, well, I've got categories and sorts. The only sort that I have right now is my RFI number. If you remember, I want to actually have a sort by category. So I'm going to have to add a new, or a group by category. So I'm going to have to go ahead and add a new sort in here, which is going to include that category field. Okay, so I'm going to cancel this for now. I'm going to click into the gear icon, click into sorts, change my category to RFIs, go down to the word category, the field category, and put that in there. Since I want that thing to be the main grouping logic of my report, I'm actually going to put that above my RFI number. So I'm going to have categories sorted first, and then within each category, I want the RFIs to be numbered accordingly, okay, or ordered accordingly. So I'll go ahead and save that. Now when I click on the sections area, I say add section, I say group header, it's going to give me the option for the category now, and that's exactly what I want. So I'll say okay. Now it added this new header section to my report. If I don't do anything and I just run this, it's going to look a little bit funny, and it's kind of hard probably to see, but you see some spacing in here every couple records for whatever reason. That's because it's actually grouping by category, and you can kind of see that on the right-hand side where it's got drawing issues and then a little space, general inquiries, a little space, and then structural issues in this space, okay? So what I can do now is within each one of these sections, I can actually add multiple different columns. We added this table header data to the page header in the beginning because that made sense, but I can pull this down to row number 5 now. Okay. Inside of row number 4, I can actually click on all the areas here. I can merge that text, and I can take this category field that we had in H and just drag that to my row number 4. Okay. I'm going to delete column H here, so I'm going to move this over. I'm actually just going to go ahead and delete H. Now when I run this, again, maybe a little bit hard to read because we haven't added too much color, but I'm starting to see some really nice grouping logic within my report. I've got header information within each group, and then I've got this detail information below it. All right. Now we can get into a little bit of styling. So let's say that this RFI report is fine. It shows at the top of my screen, but I actually want that to be a little bit bigger. So I'm going to go and merge F and G together. I can make it bold. I can grow the text size a couple of font sizes. I can put it in the middle, so align center. So all of this should be pretty familiar, or at least this style, right? If you're using Word or Excel right now. Maybe I want to border around this word RFI report. So I'm going to click into the format cells. I have numbers, borders, and conditional. I'll go in each one of these. I'm going to say border. I'm going to go ahead and add 2 black border on the top, 2 on the left, 4 on the bottom, and then 4 on the right. This is just arbitrary. I just kind of like the look of this. It kind of looks like an old school report, but you can do whatever you want there. Now, when I look at this report, I have this nice little border around that. If I run that, it shows up in that way. Before I do that, I also want to add, let's say, my logo. If you remember, we added that project logo to this reporting category. So I'm going to go ahead and here, I'm going to say I'm going to join these 2 fields together just to give my logo a little bit more room to breathe. I can go into the left-hand side, project logo. To have logos or any images, we're actually going to need a little formula to add our images. So this is the first time we're going to go into this formula editor. If I just take logo and put it in there, this actually will not work. We need a little thing to tell the report, I need to load an image into this section of my report. So I'm going to go to the formula side and get rid of this. I'm going to type the word image in my little search bar of my formulas. So I've got a bunch of different options in here, things that I can do to strings or words, formatting, financial, operators, aggregates, and we'll use a couple of these. But to find what I can do with images, I'm just going to type the word image. I'll go ahead and double click image, it gets added to the bottom. In here, I just need to add my project logo. Okay, so I'm going to load the image, project logo, say okay. Now if I run this thing, it's going to pull up this data, and there's my logo. It looks kind of huge right now, and maybe it's making this title block way too big. And that's because I'm joining or merging these 2 columns together. If I still want to join those 2 columns together for my logo, because I want it potentially to be a lot bigger than my RFI number, and I might even bring in my RFI number to be a pretty kind of small column here. I don't want that to affect the size of my logo. I can actually click on this row and set a row height of whatever I think is appropriate. I'm going to use the number 50, say okay here, and then run this report. When I run this now, I should see my project logo is going to look a lot more appropriate to when I print this thing out. It's just going to look better for me. I'm starting to get a lot of plays up here, so I'm going to go ahead and close my other tabs. In here, maybe I want to add this as bold. and I want to add some color to it. So I'm going to go ahead and add it like a light gray. You can add whatever colors that you want. I also have a little extra space up here. I don't really care about that, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that row. If I run this now just to see what the gray color looks like, this looks really nice to me. The problem is I'm getting these things a little bit close together. So I'd like a little bit more room between the general side and this drawing issue piece. So I'm going to go up here. I'm going to add a new row in my header section, okay? And that's going to give me just a little bit of space before each section name. The next thing that I want to do is if I look at my data, so if I run this thing, in here, this is all fine. It is kind of all left aligned right now. RFI number is left aligned. Maybe I want to center that. Date requested could be centered. Due date, cost impact, this should be kind of more currency looking, and then schedule impact should be centered as well. I'm going to go ahead and go in here, and what you can do is I can just highlight any of these fields, and I'm holding down the shift key to highlight all of them. And I can say I want to center those pieces of data. The subject, since that's a little bit more wordy, that's going to be confusing if I center it. So I'm going to go back to this one and just still left align that. The other thing that's a little bit funny in here is all these different columns look to be kind of the same width, because by default, it doesn't know the difference to those things. But the subject and the requested by are kind of more, have a lot more text than something like the cost impact. So I want to make these wider than some of those other columns. In the edit mode, I can say I want to grow that a little bit to the left. I'm just going to grow C also to the left. Now, if I run that, we'll see that the data is looking a lot cleaner because I've widened that data versus what we were looking at before. This is kind of messy, harder to read. This is looking a lot better. The next thing, if I want to call out the groups a little bit more, just like I added border to this title block up here, I can go into format this, say border, I'm going to add 2 and 2. Then I can also, underneath of each detail section, add one border to the bottom. Okay? So I added borders at the header, and I added one border to the bottom of every detail row. And when I run this thing, now I'm seeing something that's a little bit more easy to read. Okay. All right, so the next piece of data that I want to do is add some totals within each group. So if you look at this data, I've got some RFIs that are related to drawing issues, some RFIs related to this category, and some related to this category. I want to be able to say how many RFIs are in each category. In the edit area, I can go ahead and click on the detail, and I'm going to make a matching group footer to my group header. I have a group header based on my category. I'm going to create a group footer also based on my category. Go ahead and edit that or save that. In here now, I can, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say total or subtotal in these columns, and really I don't care about most of these, so I'm just going to enlarge all that, and I'm going to have some kind of number right here. So I'm just going to write the word subtotal. So this is just text. I can make it bold. In this area here, I'm actually going to add a formula. Okay, so this will be a little bit more complex formula, but it's still not hard. And all I want to do is I want to count the number of RFIs that are in each category. Okay. Since my group is already based on category, all I really need to say is I want to count the RFIs. So I'm going to click into this cell and click formula. In here now, I'm going to type the word count. Okay. If I didn't know what to type, I could start to look in here. So I could say aggregates. Do I want to average the data? That doesn't make sense. Count versus distinct count. Not sure what that means, but if you click on any of these, it's going to tell you a little bit of description in here. Count is what I want. So I'm just going to say ag count. In here now, and it's maybe hard for you guys to see, but if you're creating this, it does give you a little area within here that's going to tell you more about each formula piece. I'm going to say RFIs. And what is unique about each one of these RFIs? Is category unique? No, because we have a bunch of RFIs that are the same category. RFI number could be unique, but maybe not. So maybe that's a pretty safe one. But something that's definitely unique is the unique document ID. So I'm going to go ahead and add that to my ad count. So count every ID within each group. Okay, I'll go ahead and center that data, make it bold, and then run it. And let's see what we get. Okay, so in here now, I can see that there are 7 RFIs within the drawing issues. There are 4 RFIs within my general inquiries. Okay, so that looks really good. Beyond the categories, I wanted to also call out information that might be overdue based on today's date. So I'm going to go ahead and edit. I'm going to close out all the other tabs. The first thing that I want to do is I want to make this red if it is overdue. So I can highlight that column. I've already done things like formulas, but a formula doesn't make sense so much here. A formula would be manipulating what shows up in this cell. I actually want to have a conditional rule that says if it's overdue, make the text red. If it's not overdue, keep it black. I can right click on this cell and go to format my cells. We already worked in borders before. This time I'm going to work in the conditional side. If I add a condition, I'm going to say, you know what, I'm going to make my foreground color, which is the text. I could make background color, I could make it bold, all that good stuff. But I'm going to make the text of the foreground color red. Okay. When am I going to make it red? Well, I'm going to make it red when, I'm going to add a formula for this, when the RFI due date is greater than, I'm going to look for the word today because I want today's date and say okay, and then run this. Okay. In this case, it looks like I had an opposite of what I want. I'm showing everything in red that is not overdue, and that's incorrect. I just want to show how you can edit this data. So because that's incorrect, that's okay. I can always go back to edit mode. I can click on edit, format cells. It's going to take me right back here. I can say formula. And I'm going to change this from greater than to less than. And that's going to show up. I run this time. And it's going to look really good. Okay, so now I've got red text for anything that is overdue. The other thing that I want to do, and I'm going to do this all in one go, it's kind of hard to see the red text for whatever reason versus the black text. So I want to actually make that bold. So now it's going to be red and bold if it's overdue. I also want to add something like a little indication on the left-hand side. And that is just going to tell you that you can make conditions across any cell. I can even highlight the entire row if something is overdue, if I wanted to. It doesn't have to just be related to a cell here. If I didn't even have the due date field showing up on my report, I could still highlight the row based on overdue because my formula or my conditional formula can be on any field. It doesn't have to be some field that's showing up in your report. So I'm going to click into here. I'm going to also add a new condition and make it bold. And I can just copy and paste this one. So say copy and paste that right in there. Okay. And then over here, I want to add a new column before. And then I can kind of merge these together, let's say, make this smaller. And what I'm doing here, if I go back to my PowerPoint, I'm just adding that little red dot on the left-hand side to give me an indication. And I can go in here. I'm also gonna, so this doesn't have an underline to it, these ones do. I can actually click on one that does, click a format painter, and put it over there. So just a little tip from that side. So I need to add a little indication here. This is going to be something that is not necessarily text, okay? And this might be some kind of icon. In your different font styles, at the bottom of your font styles, you actually have something called Webdings and Wingdings. These are different types of icons that you can add that are font type of icons. I'm going to use this first one, okay, which is going to be Webdings. I'm not sure what the heck Webdings mean. It just looks like a bunch of weird characters at the top here, so that's confusing, okay? But you can actually just Google Webdings, okay? And I like to use this one. It says the spreadsheet guru, Webdings character mapping. You can click on that. Down here, it's going to tell you what letter from your keyboard is going to correspond with each symbol or icon within the Webdings. I'm actually looking for this little black circle. We can color that circle in whatever color we want, but some kind of circle indication, and that's going to be the letter N. Okay, so all I need to do in here is type the letter N. Okay, so I've typed it N. When I click out of there, look, it's that black circle that we looked at. Okay. I'm going to make the font color of this white, but just like I did in the due date column, I'm going to add a format cells. I'm going to add a new format. I'm going to say the text color should be red if we have this same condition that we said before. So I just copied and pasted in there. Okay, cool. So when I run this report at this point, it gives me that little red indication every time the due date is going to be showing up at. It is kind of loud at this point, so you can go in here and make this, let's say this is 5 font size, run that, and this is looking a little bit better. It's just giving me that small circle. Really easy to see. If I'm running this report, really easy to see the things that I should be paying attention to. All right, we're almost done. So last couple of things what we want to do. First of all, the cost impact. This should be more currency related. Okay, so I'm going to go in here. I'm going to click in the cost impact field. In this little format cells area, we've done this a few times, conditional formats, borders, numbers. We're going to click on number. We're going to say, hey, this isn't a general text number. This should be a number, and it's actually currency, so we're going to use this currency symbol. If we had other currency symbols, if we're working with different currencies in general, we could put those into reports and do whatever we want there. I could also do things like negative numbers, positive numbers should be red, etc. So I'm going to say okay there. That's now made this look more like currency. I could have also added things like the number of decimal places that I want to see in there, but this is looking a lot better to me. All right. And then the last thing that I want to do, okay, or maybe 2 more, I think. Last thing is, on my original report, I had these groups. And I also, on the right-hand side, if you noticed, I have calling out the number of RFIs overdue within each group. So how the heck do I do that? In here, I'm actually going to add, because it's within the group, I'm going to add a row afterwards. And in any of these columns, okay, it doesn't really matter. You don't need to merge them together, but I will here so it's called out. I'm going to go ahead and add a new formula. Okay. In this case, I'm going to say that I want to count, okay, just like we did before, but I'm going to say add count. And I'm going to add a formula within this formula. So I'm going to say if that formula that we had in the past, if the RFI is overdue, I'm going to say that's a 1. Otherwise, that's a 0. Okay, so true or false, give me this number versus that number. We'll talk more about these type of formulas in my next webinar, but this is just a semi-simple one. I say okay there. Now I run this, okay, and this is going to actually tell me incorrect number there because it's just counting everything. So I'm going to say it's counting. I actually need to sum this data. Okay, so we used count. I actually meant to use sum, and this is telling me within this grouping, there's 2 RFIs that are overdue. Within this bottom grouping, there are 5 RFIs that are overdue. That's showing up at the bottom though. I actually want it to show up over here on the right-hand side. So the last thing that I want to do during this presentation is, this is taking up the full space. I'm going to actually unmerge those, merge everything but the last one, take this format, paste it over there. So now this looks good. Now I need to add some kind of formula that's going to say overdue RFIs, which is going to be text, and some kind of formula within that. That formula is going to be a really easy one. It's just going to be A8. Okay, so I go in here. I'm going to say, quote, overdue RFIs, colon. I'm going to add a space before I end my quote. I'm going to use the @ symbol, and then I'm just going to say square bracket, A8, end the square bracket, say okay, and then run that. Okay, now I see that data showing up. Okay, so now in my header, I'm referencing this field at the bottom. I don't want that bottom number to show also because I'm already showing it up at the top right. So all you have to do is suppress that row. Now run that and get that data. So through this webinar, we've really covered a lot, and I started off pretty basic. We started ramping up a little bit. Really, none of this is hard. You just have to understand the basics of your report. What are all the buttons and toolbars at the top? There's lots of resources that you have access to kind of learn more about that. But we've created a really nice, kind of very valuable RFI report now that we can export to PDF. We could also, if I open this thing up, I've got this webinar RFI report. I could schedule this report to automatically deliver to myself if I wanted to. But this report looks great, and that's kind of what I wanted to show during this webinar. I'll go into a deeper dive in about a month, but I think this gives everybody that is a current Project Team user a really good way to test some things out during this month, come up with some questions, and we can cover those on my next webinar. Okay, so to kind of close things out, we have other, we've done a bunch of webinars. All of our previous webinars are posted on this webinar schedule page. If you haven't been there, it's a great resource near the bottom to see all those old webinars. Going forward, our other webinars are going to be posted here. You can go to our website, projectteam.com, click on resources, click on webinar schedule, and those will be listed. For those of you that are not using Project Team right now, a couple ways. What are your next steps? Continue to learn more about it. We have resources that you can download and read about, buyer's guides and general information. Evaluate specifically about Project Team. Watch videos, watch old webinars, download some brochures, and then of course you can schedule one-on-one time with any of our product specialists, and they can take you through more of the things that I've been through today or any of the other areas of the system. All right, we are cutting it pretty close here, but I do want to answer maybe one or two questions within this. Yes, so the first question is about custom forms. I used RFIs for my reporting example. If you created a brand new custom form, let's call it, the Project Team Special Inspection Form or something, those would be considered categories that you can now create a report against. So yes, 100%, any customization that you make can also be included in your reports. Even if I would have added a custom field to my RFI form, that field is now available to pull into my report, and it's all real time. I edit the field, I run the report, it's immediately updated in the report side. Will a recording of this be available? 100%. So all of the webinars that we do are going to be posted on that webinar page. You guys can watch it a million times. Sometimes I go pretty quickly through different areas of the reporting tool, but typically what really happens is you create one or two reports, and if you are a user, I highly encourage you to go ahead and try some reports in this next month. I think very quickly you will find that you can become a very adequate in the reporting tool just through a couple goes. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining today. As I said, there will be a round 2 of the reporting side where I will get into dashboards in about a month. Go ahead and try some reports. If you have any questions, go ahead and fill those out. We will send out a survey for you guys to answer other remaining questions that you all have. But thanks so much for joining the webinar, and I look forward to talking to you guys on the next one.